That's a good intro for Jen. Your documentary Shabification, which is about the ways in which rent control, rent stabilization, and other policies have made it really difficult for people. I mean, you focus on New York City, but this is true elsewhere. You know, one of the things that's interesting about Shabification, have people seen it yet, or has it shown yet? You make a landlord or a property owner the hero. I mean, going back to, I'm thinking one of the Gospels, you know, the people who own property are never the heroes of these stories. What went into, you know, making the property owner the landlord the hero? And do you think that was successful as a kind of emotional pivot?
Yeah, so originally when we mapped out the film, it was supposed to be a tenant's story, right? And everything, our storyboarding, all the pre-production was the tenant, about the tenant. And they were supposed to go and look for housing and weren't able to find. And so I did book the tenant. You know, we had 2 days of shooting in New York City. The first day was the tenant, and then the second day I kind of left the landlords. I didn't really want to, I was just gonna, they were available, I was gonna shoot. It's okay. But we arrived on the first day with the crew on location, and tenants just, literally like at 9 a.m., they text me like, we're not gonna do it. And I was like, what's going on? They ended up Googling my name and changing their mind because of the prior work that I've done, which was just policy analysis.
But it was not necessarily friendly to...
Perhaps, yeah.
I don't want to say the tenant perspective, but I mean, you were critical of rent control and price controls on housing.
Yes, I did write op-eds about that before. So yeah, they canceled the whole thing. We kind of like, okay, we're gonna do the second day. And the second day, landlords do show up. They do pretty good on camera. They participate, they tell their story, they take me to their homes. So then we just come back to, you know, the post-production, let's just do a landlord story. And now that we're doing the impact for the film, it's better that way because I am a landlord and now I'm able to tell the story of people like me. And that's easier for me to talk to legislators and developers and stakeholders because it's my story too, because I'm doing it because it affects me and people from my state, so yeah.
What is the housing market like in Buffalo, if I might ask? Because, you know, it's definitely different than New York. I lived in Buffalo many years ago, so I have memories of terrible landlords. I always paid my rent on time, I promise, but the housing stock was terrible. But, you know, how is New York City seems to have a deficit of available apartments, and your film goes into why so many apartments that are there are being kept off the market for various reasons. And this goes back at least to the rent controls that were initially put into place after World War II, if not sooner. Like in Buffalo, I suspect it's the opposite, right? There are not, I mean, what's your experience in Buffalo? What's the hardest thing being a landlord in Buffalo?
Yeah, so a lot of housing stock in Buffalo is that such that it's 2-unit or 4-unit property, and we live with our tenants. I live alongside with my tenants, and it's very common in Buffalo, incredibly common. And a lot of our bigger landlords, actually, that's how they started, right? They would just live with their own tenants, and then they would acquire a second property, third, and then that's how they would grow. In Buffalo, we do have older housing as well. We do have a lot of vacant properties. But it's overall just less expensive, and the bigger issue that we have that right now they're starting to regulate Airbnb. And honestly, my motivation for the film was that we had a mayoral candidate who was advocating for rent control. And at the same time, I had an opportunity. I got a grant to do a film, and I was like, what am I going to do the film about? I was like, I'm definitely going to do it about rent control.
Jen, what's the most innovative policy solution to housing?
I think we should make it easier for people to build. I do a lot of renovations myself with my family, and I'm familiar with building. I can put up sheetrock, you replace a window, put up wallpaper, things like that. And for me, I have an attic that has a decent square footage in my rental property. But for me, if I were to renovate it and make it livable, I I go into a different classification of housing, because I'm gonna have not 4 units, but 5. It goes into commercial housing, and although it's the same square footage, same,
Even if you're living there,
Even if I live there.
Principal residence,
yeah.
it becomes a commercial.
Once it hits 5 units, yeah. 4 units will still be okay, but I'm gonna have 5, and it kicks into commercial. So then I have to do like more just things around the house. I have to change the wiring, things like that. And these are very outdated regulations because it's much safer. Building materials right now are so safe that it doesn't really make sense for the same square footage for me to change principal components of the building. So I think we should, and just build something else in my backyard. It's just so hard to do things with your own land or your own building that it doesn't make sense to me.
You said in Buffalo the mayor is talking about imposing rent control and things like that. Is there a groundswell for this idea of like liberating landowners or property owners and landlords to do more without needing permission?
There isn't really a movement like that. I mean, the mayoral candidate who was advocating for rent control, they lost the election. I think the biggest problem right now in New York City is 2 weeks after my film got released, in New York State we have good cause eviction right now. So once you have 11 units or more, you're being essentially regulated. So in reality, we have universal rent control in New York City once you have 11 units or more. So it limits people like me. So I cannot grow beyond a certain amount.
And that's in New York State?
New York State, whole state.
Is there a difference between, upstate New York in particular, which since living there, I started thinking about it as the East Germany of New York. Like Long Island, Westchester, New York City is Western Germany, and East Germany is way up there. Is there a big difference, though, between an economic environment like upstate New York, Western New York, and California, which is rapidly becoming a communist country in circa 1990s.
Yes, indeed. I think a lot of our Western New York religious leaders were advocating against good cause eviction because there is an understanding that what might work for New York City does not necessarily work for the rest of the state. And I work with them on the impact side of this film. I do plan to do a lot of showings in the state of New York, and if anybody in the audience wants to do it in their state, I would do that as well. So yeah, there's definitely a very good sense of the difference between 2 parts of the state.
And upstate New York is so beautiful, it has always mystified me that it hasn't become the equivalent of Idaho or Montana or Colorado for the Northeast.
We do listen to very much the same music.
Jan, where's the best place for people to find Shabification and your other work?
You can reach out to me directly and I will send you a screener. And you can find me on Instagram. It's just my first and my last name. And yeah, let's talk more.
Thank you very much.